Good Sunday morning. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and this is Sunday Morning Futures. President Trump's war of words with the NFL heats up over player protests. GOP lawmakers this week make what could be their final push to overhaul health care. And this Tuesday, all eyes will be on Alabama's heated Senate runoff, a test of the president's clout. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures, where we are taking on the big subjects of the day. President Trump taking on the NFL and its players this morning over the national anthem protests. Some players and team owners firing back. I'll talk with former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee about that. Then the Graham Cassidy health care bill on life support this morning after Senator John McCain said he could not support the bill. Can it survive? I will ask Alabama Senator Luther Strange about that and President Trump campaigning for him in the big runoff Tuesday. Plus, the world is watching and waiting after North Korea's new threat to strike the United States mainland. How far will Kim Jong-un go? Former New Mexico governor, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Bill Richardson, will join me live as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. And President Trump doubling down this morning against the NFL and its players who kneel in protest during the national anthem. The president tweeting this morning. If NFL fans refuse to go to games until players stop disrespecting our flag and country, you will see a change take place fast. Fire or suspend NFL attendance and ratings are way down. Boring games, yes, but many stay away because they love our country. League should back the U.S. Former San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick started this whole knee-taking movement last season, you remember, saying that he was protesting police brutality and social injustice. More NFL players have gradually followed suit, including at this morning's Ravens-Jaguars game in London. These are fresh pictures, the scene taking place about 30 minutes ago. Take a look at this, where they once again kneeled in the U.S., but they stood up on their feet in the U.K. Joining me now, Fox News contributor, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor, good to talk with you about this. What's your take?
Well, it's amazing to me. I wish some of these players who get on one knee during the national anthem to protest this country and all the sacrifice that have made it great would get on both knees. And thank God they live in the United States of America, where they can make over $2 million on average to play a game, for heaven's sakes. I'm just amazed. Look, I get it. NFL is a full contact sport. And Maria, politics is a full contact sport. When the two mix, I'm afraid the contact doesn't work out real well. But here's a question I have for some of these kneeling players. Where were you in protest when a Washington State high school coach got fired because he led in a voluntary prayer after the game and got down on his knees with the players to say a prayer? He got fired for that. So I'm wondering, where's the left defending him? They're not. They're defending the people who disrespect the flag, and that's what it is when they use the national anthem as a point of protest.
Yeah, I mean, you know, last week we were watching a young boys game. They were really 8 years old, and they were on their knee. So even these young kids are being told, do this, even if they don't even know what they're protesting, and they don't even understand why you do stand up and respect the American flag.
You got to wonder, who told those 8-year-olds that they're somehow disadvantaged, that somehow they're marginalized, that their country is horrible to them? They're out there playing football, for heaven's sakes, at the age of 8. I think this is terrible to exploit children in this. For me, I'm frustrated that the NFL owners don't have the courage to just say to their players, look, you're paid well, you're at work. We stand for the national anthem. If you want to protest and march in the streets on your time, do whatever you want to do. You're an American and you can do that, and I respect that. I just don't respect it during the institution of the playing of the national anthem, the honoring of the flag. For me, and I think for most Americans, that is a time when we set aside all of our personal political views and we respect the unifying force of our flag, of our national anthem. And frankly, the anger directed toward Donald Trump in this, it's why he is president right now, because there are a lot of Americans who are fed up with a lot of the whining on the part of multimillionaire football, baseball players and others who pretend that somehow they're deeply oppressed by this country.
Well,
they're not.
These guys are making like $100 million contracts, $150 million contracts over 3 years or something. I mean, they've got incredibly lucrative contracts. Part of the reason is this is big money. Advertisers pay up big money to watch these games. That's why earlier you said the average NFL player earns $2.1 million. The average NFL team is worth $2.34 billion, and the NFL alone is going to pull in almost $5 billion from television fees from CBS, Walt Disney-owned ESPN, Fox, DirecTV. They're going to pull in that kind of money because of the huge ratings, but now those ratings are down because maybe the owners or maybe the players forget exactly what they're protesting, but you know what? The fans have not forgotten. The fans are pushing them away.
No, they haven't. They haven't forgotten at all, and that's why a lot of fans are abandoning watching. They're not buying the merchandise. I'm happy to say my Dallas Cowboys are still standing. I will continue to watch them, and I'm so proud of them for not joining into this nonsense.
But there's more to this story, though, right, Governor? I mean, while most Americans, I would say, agree that you stand and you respect the American flag because it represents our tough, courageous men and women who went to fight for our freedom and ultimately war and hostilities all around the world. So, yes, I think most Americans agree you have to respect the American flag. But also, a lot of people really don't want the president to get into this fight. I mean, with everything going on, Governor, from North Korea to the health care battle to the tax reform package expected next week, should the president be doubling down in these tweets this morning and continuing this fight? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, you know, if I were advising him, I'd probably say, leave it alone. It's not worth your time. But we're talking about Donald Trump, and everybody should know by now, if they haven't figured it out, that Donald Trump is not a person who likes to exercise great restraint when it comes to an opinion, especially on things like this. So we're going to expect it. It's almost like this, Maria. When the NFL play, you know somebody's going to get hit really hard. When someone goes after Donald Trump, somebody's going to get hit really hard. And so I don't have any surprise about it. I frankly think probably he could spend his time tweeting on some things like the health care bill, North Korea, and I hope he does.
Now, Robert Kraft is one of the president's, I think, allies. He is the owner of the New England Patriots. He's been to the White House. He's been with the president. I think there's a mixed situation when it comes to some of these owners and their support for the president. Bob Kraft has been in the president's corner. Others, not so much in terms of the NFL owners. Yeah. What's your take on where this goes? There's Bob Kraft right there in the crowd, as you see, first row, listening to the president right here.
I just think that a lot of the owners are feeling the pressure that they've got to line up with their players who are really angry about a lot of this. But I also wish that they would think about what they're saying. Goodell said something yesterday that was ridiculous. He talked about how the NFL is a unifying force. It isn't anymore. It once was. But when football and baseball and basketball become political arms, we lose something in the sport. We go there to escape the political, the divisive stuff. Same thing with the arts. When the arts become a platform for politics rather than for music and acting, then we lose something. Why can't we have some arenas in which we come together? And that's what sports and the arts have historically been. But some people want to take politics into every arena and, frankly, I think ruin it for the rest of the people who would like to just enjoy sports, enjoy the arts. Instead, now we have to fight about it, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's true, and it's just showing more divisiveness. A quick question on any of this getting involved in the issues at hand, Governor, in terms of the tax details released next week, as well as this health care bill, which is on life support right now. What are your thoughts? Is this going to confuse things, get in the way?
You know, I don't think it's really going to affect those particular pieces so much as it is that the atmosphere in Congress, which is so toxic, has nothing to do with sports. I think it's just that you've got some Republicans who don't remember why they were sent there. They were sent there to get rid of Obamacare. They were sent there to push things back to the states. Graham Cassidy isn't perfect. It really isn't, but it can be fixed. But we can't fix Obamacare. It's spiraling to the surface of the earth, and it's going to implode. And a lot of people are being hurt by it. And that's why I hope that Republicans will start realizing that if they don't do the job they were sent there to do on both taxes and Obamacare, by gosh, we'll bring them the heck home.
Yep, exactly. All right, we'll keep watching this. Governor, good to see you as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
Governor Mike Huckabee there. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking on the Graham Cassidy health care bill. Will Senator John McCain's opposition prove to be the measure's death blow? Alabama Republican Luther Strange is up next on the Senate Budget Committee. He will join us as well as ahead of his big fight this week. You can follow me on Twitter at Maria Bartiromo at Sunday Futures. Stay with us. We're looking ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Coming up, Bill Richardson on North Korea. Welcome back. The fight to repeal and replace Obamacare is not over, despite Senator John McCain's announcement that he cannot support this latest Graham Cassidy bill. Republicans reportedly working on a new version of the measure in a bid to win over those two other potential holdouts, that is Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. Let's bring in Republican Senator Luther Strange right now of Alabama. He's on the Budget Committee. He's also locked in a tightly contested Senate runoff being held this Tuesday. Sir, good to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Maria. Glad to be on.
Yeah, you've got a big week ahead, that's for sure. Let me ask you, Senator, about the budget and about the health care bill before we get into your own race. Sure. What are the prospects that we will actually see a health care bill to the president's desk this week?
Well, it looks like the odds are getting slimmer. I'm very disappointed to see some of my colleagues who promised for years to get it done say they are having issues with it. I had a chance to talk to the president about it at length when he was here in Alabama recently. He's pulling out all the stops to try and get us to 50 votes. I'm going to do everything I can to convince my colleagues. We've got to deliver on this, Maria, because we've got to turn, as you just pointed out, to tax reform, relief. There's so many things to be done. It's a very frustrating situation.
Well, you've got to get through the budget before you even get through tax reform. How does that look right now?
I think it looks very good. That's why I'm anxious to get health care dealt with, and we have a limited window to do that. I've been meeting with the Treasury Secretary and others. We have a plan to get tax reform to the Senate floor. I think it's a good plan that'll bring together the House, Senate, and the White House. But we've got to turn to that quickly, because if we're going to get it done, it's got to be done, in my view, before Thanksgiving to take effect next year.
Yeah, so what are the debates going on? I mean, we understand that the president is going to release details this week of the White House plan with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, where you'll see a corporate rate of 20%. Down from obviously 35, and you'll see a pass-through LLC rate of 28%, and then you'll see most deductions going away. Are you seeing pushback in the Senate in terms of agreeing to the elimination of those deductions?
Well, I'm sure it's going to come up when we get to the specific deductions they're talking about, because there's some sacred cows in there, as you know. The thing that I like to see is the lower rates, the simplicity that'll be a part of this. And, and I think you'll also eliminate some of the arguments about reducing taxes on the super wealthy in this country. I don't think that's going to be part of the package. So I think that helps us. You never know. We may get even some bipartisan support.
I mean, if the president comes out with a plan to cut the highest rate on an individual from 39.6 to 35%, but you also eliminate the deduction of state and income tax, right, doesn't that offset any cut in rates for the rich?
That's my sense of where they're trying to go. They're not trying to make this all about tax breaks for the wealthy. It's really got to affect the broader economy, corporate rates, pass-through entities, of course, and then simplicity and lower rates for the average working person in this country who desperately needs that.
So you do think we will get a tax plan, and you do think you'll be successful in terms of getting a tax reform bill to the president's desk by year end?
I absolutely do. I just don't think, Maria, that there's all the controversy surrounding this health care bill. I mean, we've got to address that, and we're going to address it. But it's without the cooperation of our fellow Republicans, it's extremely frustrating.
And I know you just want to get a bill over the finish line. I get that. But are you comfortable signing on to a bill, the Graham Cassidy bill, that leaves most of the Obamacare taxes in place?
I don't like it at all. I don't like leaving any of those taxes in place, but I'm interested in progress.
Right.
And there are people hurting in my state right now. That's what I'm keeping my focus on.
I can understand. Let's talk about your state. You've got this runoff coming up on Tuesday. We invited Roy Moore on the program so viewers can see both of you. He declined. What's the case? Make the sales pitch, Senator. Why should your state vote for you?
Well, there's just a clear choice between me and my opponent. That's why the President of the United States was here on Friday campaigning for me. I'm new to Washington. I've got real-world experience in actually getting things done. As Attorney General, stopping the Obama overreach on many fronts, cleaning up Montgomery, my state capital, 25 public corruption convictions, and now supporting the President since the short time I've been in Washington. So he knows he has a partner in me. My opponent doesn't want to come on the show, answer questions, not particularly versed in the issues, really more of a protest candidate, which, Maria, frankly, people are mad at Washington. I share that anger. So he's kind of a proxy candidate for a lot of people that don't like Mitch McConnell or whatever the case may be. But this is about getting things done, and I think we'll turn out our voters on Tuesday and be very successful. In the meantime, I should mention the Vice President will be here in Alabama for me on Monday night. So I like the momentum on the ground here.
Well, you certainly have the leadership on your side, but you're still down, Senator, right? So, I mean, the President comes, he does that rally in Alabama for you Friday night, and that's where he made the comments about the NFL, saying, you know, get those SOBs off the field. And that obviously sparked a lot of controversy this weekend. Were you surprised by his comments? Did you know that was coming?
I didn't know that was coming, but I wasn't surprised, and it was very well received. And Huntsville, Alabama is one of the most, it's a strong military city, a very patriotic state in Alabama. We support our military. It was incredibly well received. I think he was right on about it, and you know, I had no problem with those remarks at all.
Well, now, you know, players are pushing back, saying, look, we have our freedoms. This is a free country. If I want to get on one knee, I will. I'm allowed to do that. Well, how do you answer that?
Well, it's absolutely a free country, but you don't have to go to an NFL game. You don't have to watch them. And I think people are voting with their television sets, just turning it off. The people of our country, in my state particularly, are patriotic, and they'd like to see some people, particularly these advantaged, privileged people with a great opportunity, just show some respect to the flag. That's what they do every day.
All right, we will leave it there. Senator, good to talk with you. We'll be watching Tuesday. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
Senator Luther Strange joining us there. Meanwhile, a frightening new threat from North Korea against the U.S. and the mainland. What's next in the step to deal with North Korea? Former UN Ambassador Bill Richardson will be joining us live next. We're looking ahead on Sunday Morning Futures right now. Welcome back. President Trump heating up his rhetoric on North Korea this weekend, warning the regime's foreign minister that he, along with dictator Kim Jong-un, quote, won't be around much longer if they order strikes on the United States. This comes after the foreign minister spoke at the United Nations General Assembly yesterday, calling President Trump, quote, mentally deranged, and saying his insults make a strike on the U.S. mainland, quote, more inevitable. Joining us right now, former ambassador to the United Nations, former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson. Governor, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, Maria, thank you.
Your reaction to all of this, Governor?
Well, I've never seen this level of brinkmanship, personal insults from the leaders themselves. And I don't think that's healthy. I don't like the President of the United States insulted. I don't like Kim Jong-un making these enormous threats and then carrying out with missile and nuclear tests. This is not conducive to diplomacy, but at the same time, I think it's part of Kim Jong-un's strategy to deal only with the United States. The North Koreans, I've dealt with them for years, big egos, very fragile. They want to be the big players in the region with the United States, not with China, not with South Korea, not with anybody else. So I think reaching this level of very heated rhetoric, eventually, if you're going to try to negotiate and tamp things down, it's going to be very difficult. So, you know, I think the president's advisors, and I like General McMaster, Kelly, they seem like very sensible people. They're trying to tamp the president down. I'm reading those reports. That makes sense. don't get into personal insults with Kim Jong-un, because this is what sets North Koreans off.
Yeah.
Those personal things, calling, I remember the father was called a dwarf by one of our presidents, now Madman, Rocket Man. Let's start talking and negotiating instead of like these insults that are infantile, but also at the same time very destabilizing to a region that, you know, is very, very worried about exploding.
Right. Well, what is this next step, though, in terms of negotiating? Haven't we been negotiating for a long time, and where has it gotten us? He's still testing missiles. Why is he testing these missiles? What do you think this guy's thinking?
Well, what he wants to do, Maria, is he wants to reach a level, his highest negotiating nuclear level, which is to be able to say that with an ICBM missile, he can hit the U.S. mainland. I think now he can hit Guam, Alaska, but the U.S. mainland has been his goal. So he wants to have the utmost negotiating strength coupled with putting China aside, South Korea aside, deal with the United States.
Why?
Then he's going to say, I believe.
What is he doing? For what? What did the United States do to him?
I think what he wants to do is another nuclear deal like happened in the Clinton administration. In exchange of reducing their nuclear effort, you give the North Koreans some kind of relief of sanctions, you give them some kind of economic assistance, energy. This was a package that 6 countries gave them then. And, you know, the good news in that Clinton agreement, you're not going to like this, was for 9 years, the North Koreans didn't build nuclear weapons. Then they got out of it. And unfortunately, that's where we are now.
Yeah, well, I think you make a really good point, because we know that just this weekend, Iran is testing its own missile. And, you know, the president has talked a lot about this Iran deal being terrible. So Iran tests a new ballistic missile hours after showing it off at the military parade. What do you think that was all about? First, I have that question, then I want to ask you about this Iran nuclear deal.
Well, I think that was to send a message to the world and to the president after his UN speech. Look, you know, if you're going to get out of the nuclear deal, we're going to develop our missile capacity. What I think the president needs to do is keep the nuclear deal. Iran is complying with it, but negotiate on stopping Iran funding terrorism, going after Israel.
Can you really say Iran is complying? Can you really say Iran is complying?
They are complying. The Pentagon says they're complying. The international agency is complying on the nuclear deal. Everybody agrees to that. The missile issue, that's separate. That's a UN resolution. They should comply. We should push them to do that. But don't give up on the nuclear deal. We don't need a nuclear Iran and a nuclear North Korea out there.
Yeah. So what should the president do? What is the response from the U.S. then at this point? What should it be toward North Korea and toward Iran?
Well, towards North Korea, find a way, a short-term dialogue with North Korea. Make sure that they freeze their nuclear development, their nuclear weapons, some kind of threading the needle, because we say to North Korea, we're not going to talk to you until you give up your nuclear development. They're not going to do that. But maybe there's something in between.
Wasn't that the nuclear Iran deal?
No.
Wasn't that supposed to be what it was about?
The nuclear deal was Iran has stopped developing their nuclear weapons in exchange for lifting of sanctions. And so far, Iran has complied. Where they're not behaving is in the region, with Saudi Arabia, with Yemen, with Syria. They're hurting us everywhere. So I think negotiate, put pressure on them separately with the European allies, with Russia and China that signed the nuclear agreement. But don't give up the nuclear agreement. We already have that. We have that in our pocket. It seems to be working. Nothing is perfect.
What did you think of China's latest moves in terms of its banks? Should we be putting more pressure on China to help rein in North Korea? And what should that pressure look like? More sanctions?
Yeah, I do think this is one part of the president's policy on North Korea that makes sense. China has leverage over them. Not enough to make them get down on their knees and stop their nuclear weapons, but China has pressure on them because they could control a lot of their energy, their seafood, their North Korean workers that work in China. We tried to get an oil embargo. We couldn't get it done at the UN, but we got a cap on oil. So, you know, that pressure, I think, is slowly working. But is it enough for China to stop North Korea's economy? No, and I don't think China wants to do it. But China is moving in the right direction, and that is a policy front of the president that I think makes sense.
Yeah,
but now you need diplomacy.
Right.
You need some kind of deal. We can't continue these tweets and this tension and these missile tests and, you know, the people of South Korea and Japan, and we got American troops there. Everybody is very worried about what's going to happen.
Right. Well, to be clear, the missile tests are coming from Iran and North Korea. President just needing to respond to this.
Right.
Governor, it's good to see you. Thanks so much, Ambassador. Governor
All right.
Bill Richardson joining us there. Coming up, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee raising new questions about the FBI's Russia probe and the decision to wiretap former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort. Was the Trump campaign warned ahead of time? I'll talk with former Attorney General Michael Mukasey on that as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. AG Mukasey is next. Welcome back. A new twist in the Russia investigations. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley is writing a letter to the FBI asking if it took any steps to warn the Trump campaign about possible Russian connections to some of the campaign's top officials. Grassley says that the Bureau did warn Senator John McCain's 2008 presidential campaign about similar connections. I want to bring in Judge Michael Mukasey right now. He's former U.S. Attorney General. And Judge, it's a pleasure to see you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Why is that important? Who got warned when?
Well, I would think what it shows is whether either the FBI was or was not following its usual practices with respect to this investigation. And if there was, in fact, a warning of the McCain campaign in 2008, then presumably the same procedure should have been followed with respect to the Trump campaign.
Right.
Notably, I think people in the McCain campaign have denied that there was such a warning. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't given.
Well, you know, one of the issues that I've been really struck by is all of these wires being tapped. All Mr. Comey's wiretaps. Congress needs to learn how the FBI meddled in the 2016 campaign. Talk about Russia meddling. How about the FBI meddling? So what's your take on Paul Manafort being wiretapped before and after the election, after the president won?
Well, a take on that is that it was probably part of a counterintelligence investigation to determine whether the Russians were meddling in the campaign, which, if it was a counterintelligence investigation, is entirely proper. The question is obviously whether he was wiretapped or whether he was simply overheard on a wiretap that targeted somebody else. I don't think we really know that yet. But if he was wiretapped, then the question is, I guess, whether he was pursuing contacts with Russians who, I mean, there were claims that he was talking to a Russian with connections to Russian organized crime. It was the same guy who had been talking to the McCain campaign back in 2008.
Yeah, but Judge, all of this speculation about, you know, where the meddling was and who's speaking to who, we have no evidence of any crime here. And you have made the point umpteen times with me in the past that in order to hire a special counsel, you need evidence of a crime. Where is the evidence of a crime, and what is Robert Mueller doing?
Those are two excellent questions. The regulations specify that if a special counsel is to be appointed, it has to be on a finding that there is a criminal investigation that's warranted. That's the predicate. In order to have a criminal investigation, you've got to have a crime. There ought to be a specification of a crime. There is then a requirement that when the special counsel is appointed, he or she has to be provided with a specific statement of facts that warrant the investigation. In other words, these are the facts we're investigating, and this is the crime we're investigating. We haven't seen that, and that's a problem.
Meanwhile, we know that Susan Rice was unmasking so frequently. They're saying unmasking on a daily basis. She wanted to know all of the names of the people who they were wiretapping, and she was telling colleagues. Then you've got all of this wiretapping of by Jim Comey, and of course, under oath, Jim Comey said, "No, I'm not aware of any wiretapping." So, is there a problem there? I mean, he went in front of Congress. now, you know, Trey Gowdy says, I want him back in that seat. We need to understand why he said one thing and it's completely opposite than what we're learning now.
Well, I don't know precisely what he testified to, and I think you'd have to go back and really lawyer those words and determine whether he was specifically aware of this particular counterintelligence wiretap. If he was, then obviously there's a problem there. But the issue is less whether there was a counterintelligence investigation than the use that's being made of it now.
What's your take on the president's ability to actually, you know, get his issues through when you've got lots of people running agencies within governments who are not agreeing with him? They're not on his team. In fact, they might be Obama holdouts. Well,
the problem is that the president, unfortunately, has not staffed up the way he should, and some of that is due to the delay in the White House naming people. Some of it's due to Congress's delay in confirming people. But whatever the cause of the delay, the fact is that there are a lot of holdovers in all the departments of government from the Obama administration, and
right.
They obviously don't share, or some of them don't share the president's agenda.
Right.
Some of them are faithfully executing it. There are people in the Justice Department, for example, who are pursuing cases, civil rights cases and so on, that are within the Trump agenda. That they may personally oppose, but nonetheless are pursuing them diligently.
But is there going to be a limit in terms of when Bob Mueller can come out and say, okay, I've done this work, I've done that work, I've done this work, I'm done. There's no more, you know, investigations to be done because we haven't found it. I mean, how long will this go on? Or is this going to go on for the president's entire term in office for 4 years or even 8 years, where you have a special counsel poking, wanting to interview people?
Excellent question. And unfortunately, there is no limit.
No limit?
None.
How much is this costing, Judge?
We don't know. The office is essentially self-funding. I mean, he has the ability to get any resources he wants. So far, he's got 17 prosecutors, which is more than, as far as I know, are devoted to any other case that I'm aware of. And they're all digging. Some of them, a couple of them are from people who participated in the Enron investigation, which is a case where the obstruction statute was pushed beyond proper bounds, and every case that went to trial in that investigation was reversed either completely or in part. So you're talking about people who have a particular bent who may be running this, and that's not helpful.
This is just extraordinary, Judge. It's great to get your insights as always.
Good to be with you.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Judge Michael Mukasey there. It is a crucial week for health care on Capitol Hill for sure. What happens if the GOP fails to get the votes to pass the latest attempt to repeal and replace Obamacare? And how about those details on the tax proposal? Our panel is up next, weighing in as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. We'll be right back. All right, GOP senators' last-ditch effort to repeal and replace Obamacare in trouble this morning after Arizona Senator John McCain said he will vote no on the Graham-Cassidy bill. This morning, Senator Susan Collins said she's likely a no as well. The Senate has until the end of the month to try to pass the bill by a simple majority rather than a filibuster-proof 60 votes. I want to bring in our panel on this. Ed Rollins, former White House advisor to President Reagan. Mary Kissel, member of the Wall Street Journal's editorial board. Both are Fox News contributors, and it's great to see you both. Thanks so much for joining us. Your thoughts on where we stand?
I don't think it's last ditch. I think it's in the ditch.
It is in the ditch.
And I think that the reality is that the votes are not there. They've never made the sale. Literally only a third of the country wants the new program. I think the program would be a better program than Obamacare as it's currently written, but it's still not a good plan, not a perfect plan, and I think there's a lot of objection to that. I just don't think they're going to make it.
And there are a lot of implications to this, Mary. You wrote this. The editorial board focuses on what this means for low-income people, for America.
Right. I mean, the most obvious impact, if they don't pass this legislation, is on the people of America, the millions of Americans who are seeing their premiums go through the roof, the millions of Americans who are seeing their deductibles go through the roof, who are having, maybe they're pushed on to Medicaid and they don't have access to decent doctors anymore. And also, as you say, on low-income people who are hit very, very hard, Maria, by these penalties.
So what happens now? It looks like it's not going to go, it's not going to cross the finish line.
Well, you see Medicaid being expanded to people who are young men, for example, working-age men.
Healthy and strong.
Yeah, healthy and strong, getting Medicaid. And so you see that program being targeted not to the people it was meant to help, but on to able-bodied people, and that will just continue if they don't pass this bill.
That was the brilliance of Obamacare, not that it was a good health plan, but it was a good political plan. They roped all these people in. They now basically are constituents of both Donald Trump and these members of Congress, and you're taking something away from them, and they're very upset about that. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to have to revise it sometime. You're not going to get it revised this cycle, and you're going to have bipartisan support, and that may be a year from now, maybe 2 years from now. But the program is falling apart, and it's going to make a lot of Americans pay very dearly by lousy health care and enormous costs.
All the while all these programs are on the road to insolvency.
Yeah, exactly.
Medicaid,
exactly.
Medicare, Social Security.
Yeah, and why do you think Republicans ran for 4 consecutive election cycles promising to repeal and replace Obamacare? It's really stunning to see someone like Senator John McCain say he's against this because he wants regular order and some kind of bipartisanship. What planet is he living on, Maria?
I mean, didn't
Chuck Schumer is not going to give him real reform of Obamacare. In fact, Schumer came out and praised McCain's courage. You know you're doing something wrong when Schumer is praising your courageous opposition.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's a long ways to go, and I think at the end of the day, there's no more time in this cycle, and you have to get to what's really important for the Republicans. If you're going to be debating this in the 2018 election, you're going to be losing. I think the tax reform is the critical thing today, and we're running out of time, and that's what has to come forth.
All right, let's get into that when we come right back. We'll take a short break, then I want to talk about tax reform. What will we see released from the White House in the upcoming week? Back with our panel in just a moment as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Future. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're back with our panel, Ed Rollins and Mary Kissel. We're talking about the tax package that we are going to see and hear about this upcoming week. We got some rough details. I don't know how detailed the president's plan will be, but right now they're talking about eliminating all deductions, Mary, except charitable deduction, retirement deduction, and the third one is charity, retirement, and mortgage.
Yeah,
and the mortgage deduction.
Yeah, the mortgage
Those are the only 3 that will stay. Do you think that's going to be where the fights are in terms of pushing back on this tax plan?
Well, you're never going to get rid of the mortgage and the charitable deduction. But look, Maria, if you were able to cut corporate tax rates down to 20% and you were able to collapse 7 rates into 3 on the individual side, get these trillions of U.S. dollars that are offshore back here investing in America, that would be a huge boost to the U.S. economy. You know, there's this false narrative out there that somehow we in America cannot grow faster than 2% a year, and that is absolutely balderdash.
Yeah.
Not true. We could grow 3%, 4%. Companies are willing to invest. They're willing to take risks. You just have to lift the burden off of them. And I think that a plan like this would do that.
And everybody's talking about that in fact, if you see the corporate rate go down to 20% and the pass-through at 28%, it's going to give these companies more wiggle room to actually invest in their businesses and hire new workers. But what I'm talking about in terms of the deductions, Ed, is the state and local income tax deduction, which is going to be eliminated according to the president's plan. This is what we're hearing now. Will a state like New York go for that?
Well,
Will a state like California go
like
for
New York
that?
and California and the people that live in those states are not going to. If the plan as laid out here was the final plan, you probably could get it passed. The problem is you're going to be fighting among Republicans about not the 20%, whether you want it to be 22 or 23. There's a whole bunch of Republicans that don't want to basically add to the deficit. This obviously adds to the deficit, and I think to a certain extent is betting on stimulating the economy and making it work out. But I think at this point in time, it's not a done deal. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight within our own party, and we've got to basically get it. And the president has to go sell this.
Yeah.
You can't have Mnuchin sell it. You can't. And this is what happened in healthcare. He's talking about too many other things other than this plan. This plan is going to work for Americans, and he has to go out and convince Americans of that.
Yeah, and the other big question, too, is will Republicans learn from the CBO numbers that they fought over during the health care debate? You know, the Congressional Budget Office makes certain assumptions, whether it's about health care or tax reform, and they're off often wrong, and yet Republicans let the CBO define the health care reform debate. Big question here is, will they make the same mistake when it comes to tax reform, or will they look to other outfits like the Tax Foundation or a group inside the Treasury Department and say, you know what, based on what we've learned from tax cuts before, what stimulative effect does that really have on the economy and people's behavior? Because if they just look to the CBO, Democrats will define the debate, CBO leans left, and you know what, they'll probably lose the argument.
You're absolutely right, and the Treasury has their own scoring area.
Right, Mary, you're an intellectual, and you obviously write for a great publication, and you think through these things. Ordinary members of Congress basically, what can I bring back home, and what can I argue with my voters? And that's a totally different argument. They're all starting to panic. Come January, February, they're going to be in a knockdown, drag-out election year, and I think to a certain extent, people now realize in the Republican Party that they better get something on the game.
Can they pass this without it being revenue neutral or deficit neutral?
I think they made a determination. If they try and make it revenue neutral, they're going to lose. They're just not going to get. I don't think they're going to get it done.
Right.
And so that's going to be an argument. But I think at the end of the day, they have to basically. There's a $1 trillion figure put in the Senate bill. I think it'll be similar to that.
Right. You know what, Maria? If they get rid of the state and the local tax deduction, it'll actually make residents of blue states like New York and California feel the impact of the tax burden. It could actually make people upset and angry and maybe incentivize some reform there, too.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, the panel weighs in on the one most important thing to watch in the week and weeks ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Stay with us. Welcome back. What to watch in the week ahead with our panel. I would say the tax cut plan is most important to me because Deutsche Bank out with a report saying that a 5% tax rate is equal to 5 to 8% earnings increase expectations for the banks. So that'll move markets next weekend.
I'm watching the Alabama runoff. Obviously, if McConnell's person does not win, which is our guest earlier tonight, there'll be lots of other potential challenges, and he'll have chaos in his caucus.
Wow, Mary.
I'm watching two elections, actually, Maria. One in Germany, where Chancellor Angela Merkel looks like she's going to sweep back into power, her fourth term.
A fourth term.
Amazing.
Incredible.
And then tomorrow, Monday, the Kurdish referendum in Iraq that pretty much everybody is opposed to, threatens the stability of that country and our efforts there. Very important to watch, not getting a lot of press.
We'll watch it as well. Great to see you both. Thank you so much. That'll do it for Sunday Morning Futures. I'll see you tomorrow morning on the Fox Business Network on Mornings with Maria, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern. Join me. Media Buzz begins right now on Fox News.